Hello friends, Brother Daniel here. We're out in the field again. The weather's finally turned out pretty nice. It's starting to feel like autumn finally after the heat wave has been over. So it's really enjoyable to be out in the field right now. Got a clear sky. The moon is pretty bright. It's over halfway lit right now. You can almost walk around in the field without a flashlight, really. It is really beautiful outside tonight, and I've just been standing out here for probably about 20 minutes now already, just letting my eyes get used to the darkness, and you can see a lot more stars if you just stand outside for about 15 minutes and let your eyes get adjusted, and you can see so many stars. It really is amazing to see God's creation, and tonight just reflecting on the signs that we see. Literally, I'm out here looking at it with you right now too. If we look over here toward the south, a little bit toward the west, we see Scorpius right above the horizon now still. It's about 7:30-ish, I think. But I can see all of Scorpius right over there. It's a little hard to see because the moon is kind of bright somewhat, but you can still see it. I could see the stinger, 2 stars there, and a little bit of the swoosh of the tail and the upper body area, usually what most people think of as the head area of Scorpius, and Antares. It's neat to see Antares bright red, and as it gets closer to the horizon with the heat and inversion layers of the atmosphere and all that, it has a twinkle to it. So because Antares is the heart of the scorpion, just looking at it, seeing it shimmer and twinkle, it almost looks like a heart beating. It really reminds me of that, and to see that pictured in the enemy, the adversary, right below Jupiter. It's really an incredible visual sight to see. And it's a real nice, crisp night out tonight. Definitely has that autumn feel in the air. And so the air is really clear. So I can see a lot of stars. I could see Sagittarius, see the teapot reference lines of that. And Saturn is in Sagittarius. And if you just make a mental note, if you see Saturn and then you see Jupiter, and mentally draw a line between the two, that will give you a good idea of where the ecliptic is, because both Jupiter and Saturn are traveling on the ecliptic. And then off to the left you'll see the moon, and you could extend the line over to that because the moon is traveling around the ecliptic. It's a little bit below the ecliptic right now, but that gives you an idea of where the line is that Psalm 19 talks about. And then of course, as I look at Sagittarius and Scorpius right above, that is Ophiuchus. It's a very large constellation, and then you could see a little bit of serpents, the serpent that Ophiuchus is wrestling. It's a little hard to see just because of the moonlight's washing it out a little bit, but you can definitely see serpents on the right of Ophiuchus and a little bit on the left of it. But you can also see, even with the moon right between Sagittarius and Scorpius, you can see the Milky Way going almost vertically at this time of night. It's very faint, partly because it's washed out by the moon, but it's there. You can see it where it is. The stinger of Scorpius is kind of resting right on it, and the right foot of Ophiuchus is also touching the Milky Way too as well. And if we look straight up a little bit on the other side of the Milky Way, above Sagittarius we see Aquila, the eagle up there, and then if we really look up, there's Cygnus the swan way up there, almost directly overhead. Off to the right setting, you can see Arcturus, very bright, which is over Virgo, so that gives us a good reference idea of when we know where the line is and we see where Arcturus is. We know Virgo has recently set, and you can just barely see one of the stars of Libra at the moment, but that's the claws of Scorpius. And of course, that's the next chapter after Virgo. Let me see, what else can we see just as we're looking around here? There's so much that we can see. I got trees behind me, so it's harder to see without walking all over the place. But I can see a little bit of Draco on the other side behind the trees, and the Big Dipper. And I don't see any meteor shower things from the Draconids tonight, but I can see a lot of other things too. And I don't just see what we see now up in the sky. That's the incredible thing. It's particularly here for me, I'm always coming out to pretty much the same spot, the field that we have come to before. We've had field trips, we've come out and we've looked up before. So what I'm seeing when I come out here, and I hope you see it too, is you see what the Lord has already shown us here at the same place too. And see the signs. We've seen Jupiter, we've seen Venus, we've seen the celestial rehearsals in Virgo before. We've come out here and we've looked at it. And we've looked up and we've lifted up our heads. And we know that our redemption draweth nigh because we see the story, literally. And now we're at a point where we're seeing the same story, we're just seeing it further along the line. The line that's between Jupiter and Saturn and the moon, that line, we've seen the story happen along that line. And when we look up at Jupiter right now, we're looking at it where it is on that line, realizing it's further along the same line that we saw it travel through in Libra and in Virgo and in Leo. It's the same Jupiter, it's the same line, it's part of the same story. It's just further along in the story, telling a different chapter. It's telling the chapter that we see the day approaching. When we look up in the heavens tonight, and we see Jupiter over Scorpius, and right under Ophiuchus, who's wrestling serpents, and serpents is reaching up for the crown, which is right over there somewhere. I saw it a minute ago. I think that's it up there. Yeah, that should be it. So we see the whole story and the significance of this celestial sign, Ophiuchus, right above Scorpius, realizing both these constellations. They're part of the same story, really. You include Libra into that too. It's all one multi-character story. All three of them go together, they're all acting together. But then what catches our attention, because we often wonder, well, how much longer can this sign go? How much longer can this learning journey go? Well, when we look up, we see something very distinct that we haven't seen before. We see the Milky Way. And we see the Milky Way right after Ophiuchus, right after Scorpius. And Scorpius's tail is, again, literally touching the Milky Way, and so is Ophiuchus's right foot. They both touch the Milky Way, that river of stars, which of course reminds us of the river flowing from the throne of God too. But here along the line, there's a huge celestial highlight, so to speak. The brightest section of the Milky Way is right here. So it catches my attention that there's almost literally a highlighted bookend right behind both these constellations. And of course the Milky Way, it's a band that goes up one side of the sky and comes down on the other side, right between Gemini and Taurus. So if we consider it's highlighting over there, the story, a story starts at Gemini and goes all the way up through Ophiuchus over Scorpius. And it's also continuous chronologically too, because Gemini reminds us of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, what happened there. And the promise that God gave, that one day the seed of the woman would bruise the serpent's head. The serpent would also bruise his heel as well, as a twofold thing. And so we keep this in mind when we look at the constellation of Ophiuchus over Scorpius. A very visible sign. We also know that in a few weeks we're not really going to be able to see it much longer, especially above the horizon. Really just a few more days we're going to see it very well above the horizon. And even now, just a haze along the horizon, it's starting to dip down into that, making it harder to see. But right now, today, it's a very visible sign. And when we think back to what we saw at Leo the lion, the Star Bethlehem events that happened there, they reminded us how Christ came the first time, reminded us how the seed of the woman was going to spring out of Judah, was going to be a descendant of Judah. So not only is that showing where he came from, it's showing his lineage, it's also showing his titleship, but it also reminded us of his royalty too. And so when we saw the celestial rehearsal of the Revelation 12 sign, which depicted the birth of the Messiah, the one who was promised to see the woman who sprang out of Judah, that definitely confirmed the identity, and plus being born of a virgin, we knew who that story was rehearsing. Of course, the Bible tells us that. He was the one promised, the Redeemer, who would be offered on our behalf. And we saw that portion of the story at Libra, which prophetically was the expected chronological next part of the story. And remember, when we look at Scorpius, we see that the claws anciently go to Libra. That's the way they were understood. And reflecting on the Genesis 3:15 promise, prophetic promise, that is when the adversary first bruised the Messiah, the one born of a virgin. He bruised him at Calvary, at the cross. He tried to bruise him when he was born with Herod, but the real bruising took place at the cross. That's when the Messiah was crushed and bruised for our iniquities. But it was not a mortal blow. He rose from the dead. And because of that, he has become our high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And this is very interesting to consider when we look at the signs here, when we look at the horizon, and we see the adversary reaching out for Libra, remembering that pictures the place of offering when he made himself a sacrifice on our behalf. The enemy bruised him there. That's part one of the two-part prophetic promise going back to the Garden of Eden. His heel was going to be bruised. He was going to, in a sense, receive a flesh wound from the adversary, yes, but one day he was going to bruise, crush, and give a mortal blow to the adversary's head. So that is what we're seeing now, the part that hasn't been finished yet. The part that has been fulfilled was a portion of Libra between Scorpius's claws. Where we're seeing Jupiter is now over the rest of Scorpius, the latter part of the story, what's going to happen later. Libra was earlier along the line. Where we're looking now is further along the line, further along the story. We understand there's two parts to this story. He still has yet to make his enemies his footstool, and we know who that is. That is serpents. That's listed number 1, and that's the one being held by Ophiuchus. And then, of course, Hydra, which goes all the way from Leo to Libra. And then, of course, Draco's all the way up at the north, and serpents and Hydra are seen as aspects of Draco because it's up in the north. And that's kind of the main adversary, but serpents, Hydra, and even Scorpius, they're seen as aspects, chapters of that story of the adversary, the serpent, the devil. So what catches our attention when we come out here and we look up to the sky and we see Scorpius, right now we can see, early on in the evening when we can start to see the whole thing, we can see Libra pretty well still. And so we see, oh yeah, the first part of this prophecy has already been done. What we're seeing now today, tonight, we're reminded, yes, that first part of that story was done, that first chapter. There's still another chapter. And so then we look up and we see, well, the tail end of the story literally is, we see that now too. And what do we see? We see Jupiter over Scorpius. And it's approaching the right foot of Ophiuchus. Now, do you remember what the Hebrew name for Jupiter is in Hebrew? It's Zedek, which means righteous. And Zedek, what does that remind us of? Melchizedek, the king of righteousness. And so when we look at this celestial sign that we see right now, we see Jupiter, a shining symbol of righteousness, the king planet, right over Scorpius, which reminds us that our Messiah, our Redeemer, who was offered on our behalf, pictured by Libra, who was tried to be killed by Scorpius, by the adversary, he was victorious. He is our Redeemer. He is our high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And we see that reminder of Zedek, of righteousness, about to crush his enemies, about to make him his footstool. That is the next prophetic chapter. And we see this highlighted in the heavens right now. It's so beautiful to see and reflect on. And to reflect on all that we have seen up to this point too. And so as we come out here and look up, and we lift up our heads, and as we look at Ophiuchus and constellations like that, you definitely have to lift up your head and lift up your chin a little bit. We look up and we see, wow, that's the story of our Redeemer, the righteous Redeemer, the high priest, the only one worthy to be our mediator between God and man. We see that picture in the heavens. And so when we consider all the different parts that we're looking at, Jupiter, righteousness, over the adversary, right after the first part of Libra, the offering, that the same adversary that he's over right now tried to bruise his heel before, we're seeing that same picture. That's what's so amazing about the constellation, the signs that we're seeing right now with the constellations and planets and everything. It not only is showing what we see now, it's telling us what we already know. He has been bruised. But, part 2, he's going to be crushing his enemy. He's going to be bruising his enemy. And that's depicted right now. And all this in context of the last generation, right at expected time for us to be expecting these signs. Just like Christ said, when these things begin to come to pass, right at an expected time, you're going to see geopolitical things come together, you're going to see prophetic things come together. Right at the expected time of his arrival, that time frame, look up. Lift up your heads. You're going to see something that reminds you of your Redeemer, and you will know that your redemption draweth nigh. And so here we are, we're out in a field right now in Shelby, Alabama, looking up at Jupiter, right at the feet of Ophiuchus, who's wrestling the serpent, standing on Scorpius, the adversary. Right at a time when we've also heard so many calls for peace and safety, so many things telling us the sun destruction, the day of indignation, when he's going to pour out his wrath on serpents, Hydra, and Draco, his enemies, when that's about to take place. We see the day approaching. You might as well, it's as plain as a sign in the sky. We will see the day approaching, and we see it certainly right now. And we see it in a sign, a constellation, whose parts declare it so loudly, of righteousness, our Redeemer, the one who is offered on our behalf. And not only is this picture so beautifully depicted, it's so simple in that it shouldn't surprise us. If you open your Bible to Hebrews chapter 8, the mentions that the writer is making of Melchizedek, of our Redeemer who became our high priest after the order of Melchizedek. After he had offered himself once forever, he sat down on the right hand of God in heaven. So that gives us a visual clue. Where is he at? In heaven. Let's look up into the heavens for signs of him. He sat down, henceforth expecting till his enemies be made his footstool. And so we can go out tonight and we can look up on the celestial clock and we can see a till that's pointing right to that chapter that we know is coming next, when he's going to be making his enemies his footstool. The King of righteousness, our Redeemer, is going to be making his enemies his footstool. And right before that, he's going to be calling his wise and faithful servants into the secret chamber, the chamber of safety. A sparing for the wise and faithful servants. A sparing to escape all the things that are coming upon the face of the earth. And that's one thing we always got to keep in mind, his promises. He said all. Escape all the things that are coming. What's coming during the day of indignation? It's not here yet. It hasn't even come yet. What's coming isn't just persecution or famine or pestilence. It's going to be on an unrestrained scale that the world has never seen before. What's coming is not here now. And when it does come, the world will know it. That sun destruction. And Jesus himself likened it to the days of Noah and Lot. How the world was unaware that judgment was coming, up until the very day that it came. The judgment in those instances came suddenly, came quickly, and this is what we're warned is coming too, how it's coming. It's coming as sudden destruction. And Christ even warned us to watch. Why? Because you will see enough to see the day approaching. You'll see celestial signs. You will know that your redemption draweth nigh, and so that's going to be quickly followed by the sun destruction. This is why he said, look up. This is why he said, watch. Why he said, be sober, be vigilant. Because if you are not watching, you will miss the signs that tell you the day is approaching. It will catch you unawares. That's how suddenly his coming is. And the judgment that follows it. Just like the days of Noah, when he was called into the ark. Jesus himself explained this to the disciples. The world did not even know. They didn't have an inkling that sun destruction was coming. On the very day that Noah stepped into safety of the ark. And a like example of Lot too. They left right in the morning before judgment even fell on the city. People in the city were waking up, going to work, making breakfast. They had no clue that judgment was about to fall. And if you remember, what did the angels tell Lot? Hurry out of this area. Head to this city that you want to go to. You will be safe there, but hurry up because we cannot do anything until you are safely out of the area. And this is a reassuring promise and comfort that we as believers, when we strive to be the wise and faithful servants like we are called to be, we can take comfort in the same promise because Jesus emphasized to the disciples, remember Lot's wife. There are so many things about that story that we can take lessons from, and he wants us to. There's warnings. Don't look back. Choose who you are going to follow. And Christ said, watch and pray that you may escape. If you're not watching and praying to escape, then you're not obeying your Lord's commands. You know, some Christians say, well, I want to stay behind and help those who will be going through the tribulation. Are you watching and praying to escape like your king told you to? You need to remember Lot's wife. She looked back and was concerned about those she was leaving behind, and she ignored the instructions that she was given, and she was the one who hurt for it. Christ told us to remember Lot's wife. There's important lessons. He wants us to focus on him, to serve him, and to love him, and listen to him, to have an ear to hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches, first and highest above all else. More than mother or father, brother or sister, more than even our own loved ones. Not to be looking back like Lot's wife. This is a time when we need to be looking up, lifting up our heads, looking unto Jesus Christ, our Redeemer, saying, Lord, what do you want me to do? Give me strength to do it. And let's do it. Let's go forward. Let us be the wise and faithful virgins, the wise and faithful servants, who are shining bright, going out to meet our Redeemer, listening and obeying his call. Let's go forward out to meet him, rising up and trimming our lamps as a demonstration for him to bring glory to our Father, and we go out to meet him, loving him and serving him, first and highest above all else. Maranatha.